Welcome back to the Rollup High Roller community. As always, nothing on the Rollup is to be construed as financial advice. We are just some educators in the DeFi space. Toss us a quick like, give us a share, a repost, send it to a friend who may want to watch this, and finally, give us a sub or a follow. It means the world to help support credibly neutral educational content in DeFi. We're here to educate, empower, and enrich you, and let's jump in. What is a based rollup? What is a based boosted rollup? And why should you care?
I don't know. I think that's what we're going to find out today.
I think today we're going to find those questions out.
Yeah.
And then we're going to go through Taiko's upgrade of based boosted rollups and talk about their kind of innovation in the space there. I remember I watched a presentation at 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵-𝗶 about that. I believe you watched one about Justin Drake.
Yeah. So Justin Drake put out an article about based boosted rollups. So we're going to go through that article.
I thought he just did based rollups. I think based boosted rollups is just Taiko.
Taiko is the only one doing based boosted rollups.
Yeah. The idea behind based rollups is you remove the rollup sequencer and you just use the L1 as the L1 block proposer as the sequencer.
Right. That's what I got from Justin Drake.
That's it. Was that based?
Okay. So it's a based rollup commits the transactions directly to the L1. They don't send
L1 as a sequencer.
There's no sequencer. It just goes directly to the L1.
Yeah.
So there's probably no possibility of MEV or any kind of like sequencing optimization or
there's definitely significant less risk of toxic MEV amongst other significant improvements.
MEV is funny because like it is toxic in a certain sense if users are the ones getting screwed.
Yeah.
But it kind of finds more value or like more efficient ordering of transactions. So the validators are getting, it's not toxic to them. They're extracting the value, but we could pass that value back on to the users.
But it's certainly a debate.
Yeah, whether it's toxic or not.
But there's a couple other key points for why based rollups are better than centralized sequencer rollups.
Okay.
The other one is this idea of, and I'm trying to pull it up for my notes in the presentation, but the other one that I know off the top of my head is this idea of there's less risk to lose the network effects of your ecosystem. So if the Arbitrum sequencer goes down, and for a long period of time, and all that value on Arbitrum gets misaligned with the state of Ethereum, and it's basically a catastrophic situation where like that value becomes like almost like worth nothing.
You lose all the value on Arbitrum.
Yeah, or on any rollup. You lose all of the network effects that you built already.
Oh, for sure.
And so by using Ethereum or the settlement layer specifically for your sequencing, you don't risk losing the network effects that you've already built.
Okay, so let's we're gonna share the articles.
Let's pull it up while I get this information because some interesting things here.
Let's get this up here. Okay, so you should see the base advantages.
This is what I needed. So go ahead.
So here's the base rollup article by Justin Drake, and this is before we get into what boosted rollups are. So first we'll take the base case, just based rollups. Superpowers from L1 sequencing. Like we were saying, kind of like our primary understanding here was that transactions, is transactions the right word? Like essentially like whatever you call them, intentions. Like there's basically the transaction is submitted directly to the L1, and we're calling that based rollups because they're not using a sequencer to submit these transactions. but it is a rollup. So they're still batching transactions together and then committing those to the L1 for changing the state of the rollup.
Yeah, he says when the sequencing is driven by the base L1, it's basically when that block proposer of the L1 may, in collaboration with L1 searchers, right, the in builders, right, permissionlessly include that next rollup block as part of the L1 block. So basically, you have the L1 proposers sequencing, a base rollup is one where the next L1 proposal in collaboration may permissionlessly include that next rollup block as part of the L1 block. So basically, you don't need the sequencer to put the transaction on L1. That is done by the L1 proposer. But the sequencer, the L2 sequencer, would still sequence the transactions, though, like order them, or no?
No,
It's just done by the proposer.
Right.
So there's basically no sequencer interaction on the L2 basis. So basically, like, if you know arbitrum, optimism, and whatever, these are technological developments, but ultimately they're all extensions of Ethereum as like this like off-chain trust layer, basically. Like, a rollup is effectively like you're trusting arbitrum or optimism or insert your rollup here, that they're going to do right by your transactions and properly batch and properly secure their nodes and have good hardware. And so basically we're trying to get away from that for these reasons, or at least Justin Drake's proposing this because centralized sequencers are kind of a problem.
Centralized sequencers are kind of a problem. And Justin Drake here describes the simplicity of based rollups as maximally simple, and therefore inherits a lot of the L1 properties, including liveness and decentralization. So this concept of maximally simple, I think is pretty important, and he describes simplicity towards the bottom here, because
it's even simpler than centralized sequencing.
You're right.
It requires no sequencer signature verification, no escape hatch. I thought that was an interesting part, was no escape hatch when I was listening to his presentation.
Provide everyone what an escape hatch is.
I believe similarly to how data availability layers have an escape hatch for if their data isn't successfully, if the nodes in their validator set don't successfully come to consensus and place the block or some sort of data proving to the L1, then the L1 can basically go back and fall back to the sequencer who batched those transactions and get the data directly onto the L1, kind of basically saying, okay, if there is no data from this data availability layer that's accurate and proven and verifiable, then the code basically goes back to the sequencer in the batch transactions and stores the data on L1. So I think similarly, what this does in escape hatch is basically in a centralized sequencer model, there's a rollback, right? Where insert rollup company here or project here, should something catastrophic happen, like the North Korea hackers hack all the chain, they can roll it back as an escape hatch, I believe, or they can, there's some sort of mechanism where the escape hatch is like a second level of trust.
Yeah, you can like circumvent kind of like the properties that are normally taking place on the everyday transaction flow through the rollup. You can kind of go to this escape hatch. You can eject yourself from this ongoing system. And I noticed, like, from what you're talking about, it has a lot of properties where you have a little bit more customizability.
Yeah.
Justin Drake is, I don't know, from this, it sounds like he's a little bit iffy about escape hatches. Notice that non-based rollups with escape hatches suffer degraded liveness. Then he goes into like some of the properties about degraded liveness. Rollups with escape hatches are liable to toxic MEV.
Yeah, exactly.
But this
short-term sequencer censorship during the timeout period.
Yeah, but without getting too deep into escape hatches, maybe we'll save that for another video. We'll keep going on based rollups here. And one of the points that I found pretty interesting was the based rollup naturally reuses searcher, builder, proposer infrastructure. And now you'll notice there's no sequencer as part of that infrastructure. So it is the searcher, I believe, that is picking up transactions when users submit them. And then it's builders who are building the batch. These builders they're not sequencing the batch. They're just batching them all together as as the searchers find them. And then the proposer proposes that block onto the L1. So
yeah. And there's the MEV involved, which is the incentive to include these blocks from the rollups in the transactions, because they basically will make money by doing so. And you can extract this rollup MEV somehow through whatever the transactions are on that rollup, or just basically on like the cost of including it.
We talk a lot about like value accrual, and we talked about like in the modular ecosystem where value accrues at the VM layer or the DA layer or the interop layer, and it would be particularly cool to dive into where value accrues in this infrastructure, whether it accrues at the searcher, at the builder, the proposer, the sequencer level. Like, where does value accrue depending on some of these different architectures? It'll kind of like tweak and adjust the flow of that value. So the concept that I keep getting here is that there's more directness to the L1, and that has trade-offs. You don't get the escape hatch for the rollback and the fail-safe opportunity, but you also get the liveness of the L1, and the L1 is much more likely to stay live because it has the consensus built into it. It's more likely to stay live than something like a rollup that could go down, essentially. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I think we kind of glossed over that liveness part at the top, but more or less, I mean, we mentioned the network effects, we mentioned MEV, and we mentioned kind of the escape hatch. So those are important. And then of course, like the gas penalty, right? So scrolling down, I think basically Justin Drake's pretty Ethereum aligned. He thinks that L1 economic alignment is very important for base rollups. Perhaps he fears a move away from Ethereum as a settlement layer, or perhaps not. So,
I think he does keep this relatively general to L1. He doesn't say this is just Ethereum. So I mean,
this is certainly this is ethresearch.com.
Oh, it's certainly written for Ethereum, but one could imagine a based rollup that settles on Solana.
Perhaps not Solana, maybe, but yeah, perhaps Solana, but more like another EVM chain. Like an Avalanche or whatever, like a Say, if they do parallels, like another EVM chain could probably apply this, but non-EVM monolithic chains, this is a whole different conversation. But yeah, I mean, going on to the next two is gas and L1 economic alignment. So basically, enjoys zero gas overhead. You don't even verify signatures. Basically, you can do no token, very low gas or no gas payments for settling blocks. Pretty bullish. And the economic alignment, basically the value flows to the base L1. That's what you're getting at. Where does the value flow? This model takes away value, in my opinion, from like Arbitrum and Optimism and whoever else, not directly necessarily, but it takes away value from rollups with tokens, and we're trying to go that model, and it brings all the value back to Ethereum. Which is interesting because there's different models for how people are doing this. And then sovereignty is super interesting. It's kind of hard to understand this one in a sense, but they retain the option for sovereignty by delegating sequencing to the L1. Like, to me, it's like, well, I mean, I'm not sure.
Sovereignty is basically saying that it has the option to charge base fees. And is that essentially saying that you could have a based rollup that charges gas in its base in its own token? Doesn't have to charge ETH gas, even though it settles directly to the L1. Doesn't have to use ETH as gas. Maybe.
Yeah, and can use proceeds. That's interesting. All right,
and it's opted, so that's the other thing. It's like they'll choose to use.
Right, that's where the sovereignty comes in. Right, but to me, like sovereign is like if you're not connected to Ethereum, you're like Cosmos app chains, or what I think of when I think of sovereign. Kind of like we were discussing the other day. So it's different folks within the Ethereum community. So this is what Justin is suggesting sovereign for rollups. All right, disadvantages: no MEV income. sequencers make a ton of money right now off transactions, from ordering and batching, just in fees as well on top of that. So Justin actually suggests something really interesting here. The reason is that the rollup landscape is plausibly winner take most, and the winning rollup may leverage the improved security, decentralization, simplicity, and alignment of base rollups to achieve dominance and ultimately maximize revenue.
Basically saying the user experience is like what wins. And if you can use a based rollup that doesn't charge MEV income, you're going to deliver a lower cost, more practical, pragmatic solution to the end user, which in theory would mean that the user sticks around on your based rollup rather than going to another one that charges toxic MEV and sequences the user's funds.
But the reality is the disadvantage here is, sure, that's the idealistic outcome that you aim for, but unless you're Mr. Big Bags, well, you're kind of in trouble.
You got to fund it. You got to fund it somehow.
That's what he's saying.
So if you're not getting sequencer revenue, how are you going to fund all the development, all the grants, programs that it takes to build an ecosystem?
Funny that he calls MEV, like sequencer fees, as MEV.
Yeah,
it's funny. It's like,
well, MEV is no longer minor extractable value. MEV stopped being minor extractable value after the merge when miners were taken out and when proof of stake. Exactly. Now it's matters.
Call that. All right, let's not get too caught up on this, and we can kind of finalize our understanding of base rollups. Constrained sequencing is interesting. Basically, you don't have as much flexibility. It makes sense. What pre-confirmations are very easy with centralized sequencer. So rollups have this situation from here where basically the goal is as quick to time to finality as possible. And Taiko is really focused on this, which is super interesting. Basically, with centralized sequencers, you can get pre-confirmations in like less than 100 milliseconds, but you have to wait on the blocks of that rollup to confirm. And then you also have to wait, I think, for the Ethereum block, which you are putting your transaction in to confirm as well, which takes usually like 12 minutes. And then at different times for, how many blocks, Arbitrum, Optimism, or whoever needs to approve. So basically, you click a button on your rollup, you get the confirmed transaction, but that's just a fast centralized sequence pre-confirmation that you're getting. That rollup has a short period of time, maybe a minute to 5 minutes. Don't quote me on that, where that is then confirmed on the rollup, and then that transaction gets centralized sequence and bashed to Ethereum, which then it needs to be included in a confirmed Ethereum block, which also takes time. So that's a disadvantage where he's saying that fast confirmation of L1 sequencing is an open problem.
Right. Well, he's also saying that you don't get fast pre-confirmations in based rollups because they don't have the centralized sequencer to provide that fast pre-confirmation.
Which is a problem because the reason why people like rollups because they're fast. Cheap first, fast second. I'm very close.
I mean, you got to go centralized if you want fast and cheap, right? There's the trouble on.
Providing Arbitrum style first come first serve sequencing is unclear with L1 sequencing. First come first serve is like basically the transaction ordering mechanism that the Arbitrum style sequencer uses. Mm-hmm. Again, it's tough because like how you're relying on proposers and builders and things. What I would like to understand though, I mean, these are all like the naming is what it is, but scroll down. I'd like to hear see what some of these people said. All right, so base rollups could capture their own MEV, could enshrine an auction mechanism inside the L1 contract. Okay, so basically it's like,
you kind of have this relayer network in that case. And I believe MEV, I don't know if it's MEV boost, but there's kind of like this auction mechanism that allows proposers, right, to bid on the blocks.
Exactly. And this guy's saying in that second paragraph, even that you could have a mechanism with a small number of batches can be canceled or replaced by grabbing the contract with a higher payout. So kind of similar to how on Ethereum after EIP 1559, there was the tip. It was like a minor tip right first, and then it was the merge, and it was a validator tip.
And the tip is to bribe someone, whether it's the searcher, to pick up your transaction, right?
Exactly. So he's saying that Maybe scroll down a little bit more.
Yeah, let's see what we got.
Roll
here.
Roll kit, cool. I think one rollup per L1 block cannot be guaranteed by proposer builder separation.
Requires to modify the L1 consensus. This is something that we kind of glossed over, which was that Vitalik had talked a little bit about this in 2021.
Yeah. Total anarchy. He has multiple rollup blocks submitted at the same time, causing wasting up. He's now understood that proposing builder separation allows for tightly regimented base sequence.
But here's the thing, and I don't know if this is
one rollup block per one L1 block.
It is now understood that proposer builder separation allows for tightly regimented base sequencing at most one rollup block per L1 block.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because if you can submit multiple rollup blocks to the L1, in theory, you could have atomic composability, as long as those blocks are able to kind of like match orders with one another. I think this is the opportunity with shared sequencing, but that's a tangent for another time. The multiple blocks submitted at the same time would pose an issue to the L1, because maybe not all transactions that get picked up in that are going to get picked up in that one L1 block. So one of the rollup blocks is going to get thrown out, canceled, have to get resubmitted, longer transaction time, and wasted gas.
Yeah, it's problem.
But now proposer builder separation allows for tightly regimented base to one
third block. That's interesting.
Wasted ZK.
All right, so now we've got a pretty fair understanding of base. I can't be bothered to dive into snarks, honestly.
Cool. Okay. There's 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵 giving his
She thought it's
2 cents.
I guess it's because it's quite intuitive solution. Nice.
Yeah. This anarchy part, and of course that's the part where Vitalik weighs in. That's where things get particularly hairy. So we'll maybe we'll dive into that a little bit deeper on another time there.
All right, so let's dive into Taiko now. Now we have a really good understanding of what a base rollup is. It's equally crucial to understand what a Taiko base boosted rollup is. So
yeah, so we clarified, and just to put it simply, the based part of a rollup is going to mean that the transactions are submitted directly to the L1. There's no sequencer as part of the proposer builder searcher infrastructure. No, sequencer doesn't appear anywhere in there. So batches are submitted directly to the L1 to be included in blocks. Okay, so that's a based rollup. Now let's learn about how we can take that based rollup and boost it. What is a based booster rollup? New major milestone in Taiko's roadmap. Based and boosted. So we're going to explore this new rollup design that comes very close to being a native Ethereum scaling solution. Call it a based boosted rollup. We already learned about based rollups and how they are arguably the most effective decentralized Ethereum aligned way of running a rollup by delegating the sequencing job to the L1. It inherits the L1's decentralization, simplicity, and liveness. We spoke about essentially all of those properties. So skipping through some of the based parts. So now,
for the more technical folk,
here's a one-sentence technical summary of what booster rollups do. Booster rollups shard the execution of transactions and the storage.
oh boy.
Let's dive in.
Go ahead and
so shard the execution of transactions and the storage.
Effectively decentralize it. The execution and the storage somehow.
Okay.
Base rollups is a black bear. Booster rollup is a white bear.
Based.
It's 2023. We're all going to come together and create a panda. A
based booster rollup.
BVR, baby. All right. So any rollup, whether optimistic or ZK, can become boosted. So let me just give a stab at what I think this is first, based on my conversations with the team. I'm pretty sure what they're trying to do is you can deploy your dApp on L2s without needing to actually go through the full deployment process.
Huge developer easeability thing. Yeah, developer convenience, major unlock.
Yeah. So basically, if you want to achieve native Ethereum scaling, so let's say you have a dApp on L1, you can launch on L2s as a base booster rollup. So let's dive into. So Base boosted rollups retain the advantage of the base rollup and adds direct Ethereum scaling. Basically, by allowing L1 validators propose blocks for the whole boosted network, you're scaling Ethereum out of the box. So again, like you're using the L1 consensus to validate the L2s. And let's have a look at the diagram here. So you can deploy your dApp on L1 once, yet execute it on all of L2s.
Because the smart contract logic lives on the L1?
It shards the execution and the storage.
It's the difference between parallel and shard. Yeah, because parallelization is a pretty popular concept nowadays.
Parallel execution or parallelization kind of comes from more at the VM layer, I think, where you can have multiple sets of transactions happening at the same time, which don't affect the same fee market. So you can have, instead of a global fee market, what you get is more of like a local fee market where you can have an NFT mint happening on one platform, charging fees, but not affecting the price of gas in DeFi and the same execution environment. Whereas sharding, I think, is more like kind of like a scaling mechanism. And I honestly think of rollups as sharding, where you got Ethereum as like this hub, and you have all these different booster rollups as shards of Ethereum. That's not the original vision of sharding for
where they split up the actual L1. That's not
it's like the original vision, but that's how I think of it.
It's like splitting up the L2.
I think rollups are effectively the practical vision of that.
Right. They just kind of like took it off of the base L1 and they put the sharding at a level away from the consensus.
Exactly. But they would still use Ethereum consensus.
Right. But they're not breaking up the consensus into different like little cities where they have their own like, validator consensus mechanisms.
Right. Exactly.
In those.
No. It's all these boosted rollups.
I think that's important. Otherwise, you would end up with like an easily corruptible, or at least a less expensive network to corrupt if you break up the consensus.
Yeah.
This way, you maintain like a very high cost of corruption. So it's more difficult to corrupt. Exactly. But you still get the scalability by kind of offloading all of the execution onto the rollups and then splitting those up.
That's why BBRs are needed to scale Ethereum the way I was imagining originally. I legit think that BBRs are effectively sharding, but in the practical form. Like rollups as they exist today with centralized sequencers are like the form that we have economically, which makes sense to shard Ethereum. Based rollups take it to another level as far as security and liveness and decentralization of rollups. Now BBRs take it to a whole other level because it's like, okay, now we have base rollups, but now we're also going to implement like Vitalik's original vision of like sharding the Ethereum main chain into 64 shards. No, we're just going to do it in this capacity, but it's effectively the same thing where you can launch your dApp on L1 and all the shards that are base boosted rollups can execute and use it as was normal, but you get the L1 validation and that's how it scales.
And the L1 sequencing, which is a particularly unique part.
And they're based rollups,
right? They are using the L1 for sequencing, and they're all of the base boosted rollups are able to use the L1 for sequencing, and that has the benefit of atomic cross rollup transactions. And again, I was listening to a panel with Charles from Espresso about shared sequencing, but the concept of atomic composability is consistent across shared sequencing and based sequencing at the L1, because at the L1 layer, all the based rollups are essentially using the same shared sequencer. It's the L1 that is providing the shared sequencer.
Yes.
So with shared sequencing, whether it's at the L1 level or another level, you're able to get atomic composability.
Yeah.
And that's where you can do tons of cool things. You can get greater price efficiency because you're able to arbitrage quicker.
This is even better than shared sequencing, because in shared sequencing you can get atomic inclusion of transactions and blocks, but that doesn't necessarily equate to atomic execution, because there's often plus or minus X amount of seconds, milliseconds, or time difference between blocks or between the way that these transactions are sequenced in the blocks. So shared sequencing gets you really freaking close. It gets you atomic inclusion into a block, but it does not give you atomic execution, because atomic execution is not the same thing as inclusion in the block. This is giving you atomic inclusion and execution because it all happens at the L1 layer. However, again, you could argue that like, well, is it really? Because yeah, sure, they can be included in one block, but not executed in the same. They can be executed in that same block, but they're ordered in a different way. And so, you know, again, atomic composability is a tough one because inclusion is not the same as execution.
Yeah. I mean, there's tons to unpack when it comes to atomic composability. Whether that means you get inclusion and execution, one or the other. No one's really like perfected that yet. None of the shared sequencers, even base boosted rollups are still ours.
Those are they're not even out. Right. I don't think there's a base rollup. Maybe there is. I'd be confused if it was, but I doubt it.
So what does it all mean? Let's roll it up. The BBR approach, the base boosted rollup approach, means that rollups no longer need to worry about fragmentation and jumping from one L2 to another. Favorite dApps, because they're deployed at the L1 layer, are able to exist across all the L2 layers. The sharding mechanism that Taiko enables. So Taiko is inherently like a base boosted rollup network where you can deploy, and then you can deploy to the L1, and then all of the rollups, the base boosted rollups that are part of the Taiko network, they all are composable with one another.
Yeah. Yep. And this can be implemented across many different ecosystems as well. From my perspective, for devs, you can just take the BBR design and deploy on all L2s without needing to, like it says, redeploy new code. You just deploy your app once on L1 and you're done. Your dApp is automatically scaled across all boosted L2s now and in the future. So like the situation where, you know, you're a dApp builder and you're trying to consider where to build your dApp. Well, you for sure are going to build it on mainnet because that, you know, that's where a lot of transactions have. That's where a lot of value is. Now when you build on mainnet, Taiko's coming in and saying, okay, all boosted rollups will have access to your dApp. Think about it. And that kind of can dictate your strategy as to how you're thinking about deploying on different networks.
Taiko will come in and they will boost your based rollup. They'll boost your rollup as long as it's based.
No. Taiko will boost like your dApp on L1. Like they will allow it to be on any based rollup that exists. Perhaps they could also boost a previously based rollup, but I'd want to say, I'm not sure. I want to say you have to launch it as base boosted rollup from the get-go.
Okay.
But perhaps I'm wrong. But I don't think Taiko could take optimism and like turn it into a base boosted rollup.
I see. So Taiko allows them to boost their dApps without the need to redeploy to all L2s.
Right.
Instead, just deploy your dApp once on L1 and you're done. Your dApp is automatically scaled across all boosted L2s, deployed now and in the future. So when? Building.
So yeah, it's almost like they're building more or less like I'm not even sure what contestation means. Like contestation is what BBR is based off, like just base contestable world mechanism, I suppose. So they're going to implement in their mainnet, and then they're going to upgrade the protocol or launch a separate L2 separate from the ZK-AVM as a major milestone. And then I think they're just going to spin up like a CDK probably, or a BBRDK, base boosted rollup development kit, and see what happens from there. So
epic.
Yeah, that's base boosted rollups.
Well, we're gonna have tons more Taiko content coming out, and it's still so early. They're still developing these tools, so this is still more of like a conceptual conversation for now. And just stay tuned for all the content that we have coming out as it becomes more practical to implement on chain.
Yeah. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.